that you have returned. So the workshop is presented by the Mental Illness Task Force and the Anti-Racism Task Force. And I just introduced myself. I also want to introduce Mary Jane Evink. Mary Jane will be our co-host today, so she'll be helping with questions and timing and keeping me on track. Thank you, Mary Jane. And our panelists returning this week are Ann McKnight, our clinical social worker, Holly Jasinski from Resilience, and Sarah Lewakowski from Mosaic, who all did just an amazing job last week. Excited to hear back. And so today we have a really wonderful opportunity, not just to hear from our panelists, but really to share with each other what's been working and maybe what challenges we've been experiencing. So the agenda is going to look a little different than last time. First, our speakers will all have an opportunity to present a recap, kind of review what they talked about last week. And then we're going to go into small group discussions. So in groups of about 4, you'll have a chance to share with each other how you did on your homework, how that went, what you accomplished, what obstacles you might have run into. And as you talk with each other, think about whether there are common themes or questions that come up. And then we'll break. And when we come back together, we'll talk about those common themes and questions. So in your group, you might pick somebody to present those questions, or you might individually enter questions in the chat. And we'll try to keep an eye for both people raising hands and questions coming into that chat, so that there's really an opportunity for a dialogue with our speakers. After that, we're going to go into breakouts again, but this time we'll have 3 breakout groups and one of our panelists in each of those groups. So you'll have a smaller, more intimate time to talk in a small group. And every 10 minutes, we're going to rotate those speakers. We'll take another break and we'll return for final comments from our speakers and then a final breakout so that you can share with each other what your next steps are going to be. We'll wrap up and have an evaluation question. So that's our agenda. We anticipate wrapping up before 5 o'clock today. Oops. So instructions, please stay on mute unless you're asked to unmute. And that could happen during the Q&A time. I might recognize you, or Mary Jane might, and ask you to unmute so you can speak. But otherwise, keep your mic off, but keep your camera on. That helps us with community and it helps us build trust and confidence as we share the struggles we have with relationships. Again, you can submit your questions, your comments via chat during any point of the workshop at all. To participate in those breakout sessions, you do need the Zoom app. So if you're just signing in using the browser, you won't be able to converse with a small group. So if you haven't downloaded the actual application, I encourage you to do that. We will be recording our speakers, but we won't be recording your personal conversations, the breakouts, those kind of things. We don't want anybody to feel that they can't share because we're going to make public their concerns. So we won't be doing that. That'll be your private concerns will remain private. We will be recording our speakers. And we'll be talking about next steps. In terms of communication and ground rules, we always review these. The first is honesty. We don't get together to debate who's right or wrong, but to share our honest experiences, our thoughts, our beliefs, and to be willing to listen to the honest experiences of others. We have panelists and they are amazing, but we all are equal and valuable contributors to the conversation. We all have preconceived ideas and they can get in the way of our listening to each other. So we want to be mindful of that so we can stay respectful to each other and to ourselves throughout our workshop. We want to try to practice active listening. That can be particularly challenging in a virtual format, but the challenge is to really try to be present here and give whoever is speaking our undivided attention during that time. We want to take responsibility for our words and our feelings. All of us have hot buttons. They can get triggered unintentionally. If that happens, we want to be able to name it without blaming anybody else for it. And finally, we really work to create a shame free zone. We want to create that space where we can be honest about our struggles as well as our successes, and do that knowing that we're not going to be put down or embarrassed by making those admissions, that this is a place of safety and security where we can all learn and we can all grow. If this is where I ask if everybody's comfortable with those ground rules, and I suggest that if you're not, it's a good time to opt out. I don't have any concern that we're going to have that problem today. All of you were in part one, and we had a wonderful conversation and opportunity. I'm sure that will continue for our workshop today. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Ann McKnight, licensed medical social worker, to recap what she shared with us last week on stronger hearts, minds, and body, building our stamina to stay engaged. So Ann, if you would unmute yourself.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I would like to just give an overview and a reminder of what I shared last time. And the main thing is, I think I shared that I consider these times that we're in right now, everybody uses the word unprecedented, but I think we're dealing with issues in relationships that just we haven't encountered before. And there's no easy answer or one size fits all, but I do know for me, there are some specific set of tools that I want to make sure that I have in my backpack as I'm going through life and encountering all the situations that I encounter. And the first one of those, last time we did a mindfulness exercise, and I talked about the spotlight of our attention and just making sure that I know where am I wanting the spotlight of my attention to go right now? What is it on? Is it on being right? Is it on getting upset? Is it on the words that someone else is saying, or is it on something else? Um, and that kind of goes into the second little tool in the backpack, is having the clarity before I'm going to connect with someone. If I'm thinking that it's going to be difficult, I want to make sure that I'm really clear inside myself which of these three reasons that we connect with people I'm coming from. The first one is to get someone to change their mind, or to ask for something from someone, or to have someone agree with me or see my side. A lot of times that's a tough one these days. And so being able to decide, is that territory that I want to go into right now? The second reason that we often are wanting to connect with people is just to strengthen the relationship. So that's something, for some people, that's where I want to shine the spotlight of my attention, is on, is this next thing that I'm going to say or do going to be helpful in strengthening the relationship, or do I need to do something else? Then the third reason that we sometimes engage with people is just to keep our own integrity. And that kind of leads into this idea of needs. We talked about on the first diagram, which I don't want to go to yet, but the idea that the only reason anybody ever does or says anything is their best attempt to try to meet a human longing. That's the only reason. And there's a lot of freedom in that. That's a great place for me to put the spotlight of my attention, to try to listen for those needs, to try to consider what needs of mine are coming up. And then we kind of took that into, and Barbara, I'm going to have you flip over to the first little slide review. We talked about getting stuck and how when we get into a place where we feel stuck, we're often disconnected from our own needs and longings, and that getting stuck is a natural, normal, without judgment, automatic response that just our human selves have. It's just like a reflex, when you tap under your knee and your leg kicks out, that's all it is. It's just a reflex. But we want to have some awareness about what does it look like when I'm getting stuck. And on this diagram, you can see there are certain kinds of thoughts that I'm going to be having when I'm in a stuck place. For me, they're often about, someone else is wrong or something that I should have done differently. There's all kinds of things. You can see blame, guilt, needing to be right, focusing on the outcome. I need to get this person to X, Y, and Z. Those are all the kinds of thoughts that are going to happen when I'm in a stuck place. And then we have the second part of the symptoms of stuck, which is our emotions, and just noticing what are the emotions for you that tend to come up repeatedly when you're in a stuck place. For some people, it's feeling angry. For some people, it's feeling helpless. For some people, it's feeling like a victim. For some people, it's a sense of resignation or numbness, and just noticing what your own go-tos are for that. The third part of our navigational equipment is physical sensations, and just noticing in yourself what's happening in you when you're in a stuck place. For most of us, there's some tension or tightness, some constriction, sometimes shortness of breath, sometimes numbing again. And so this map, the purpose of this map is to start to bring these symptoms into our awareness so that we know, we can say, oh, I am stuck right now. And then we can ask ourselves a question, which is really important. And that is, am I enjoying this? Sometimes I enjoy being stuck. Sometimes I have a couple friendships that often are based on exchanging stuck thoughts with each other about other people or, what's happening in the world. And we agree on some things, and that kind of can feel fun. And so in that case, yeah, I'm okay being stuck right now. And there are other situations where that's not where I want to be. I don't want to be just spinning. So I'm going to have you switch to the next one, Barbara. And so the alternative to being stuck, or having some kind of backstory that what's happening right now shouldn't be happening, and that I don't want to feel the way I'm feeling, the alternative to this is focusing on the idea of a life worth living. So a life worth living, or a human life, is never without pain or challenge, discomfort, disagreement. That is part of the territory. Loss, boredom, annoyance. Those are all part of the territory for living a human life. And what we want to do is find the context in which we don't mind experiencing these things so much. So life becomes, instead of how do I get away from this discomfort, it's what is important to me, and what am I okay experiencing in the service of what's important to me. I might want to stay in this conversation with someone because, even though it's difficult, because my care for them as a family member is more important than whether we agree or not. So we want to have an ability to anchor ourselves in the things that matter to us. And when we do that, I made that list of 8 C's. There's often, it doesn't mean we feel happy or relieved or everything's going our way, but we can have these 8 different qualities: calm, feeling connected with ourselves, if not with another person, a sense of compassion, a sense of creativity, meaning seeing other possibilities, that maybe there's another way around this besides needing agreement. Maybe there's another way to stay in this relationship, even though, or maybe it's clear to me that I can't stay in this relationship. And to take it from there, a sense of clarity, a sense of curiosity, a sense of confidence, and also courage. It takes a lot of courage to live in a life worth living, which means lining up with our values and the things that are important to us. So I'm going to have you switch to the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is really just a recap of all the different pieces of what I talked about. You know, what kind of life, how do I want to be living right now? Do I want to be avoiding what's uncomfortable in some way? Do I want to make other people wrong and I'm right? Or do I want to live my life asking this question, what is it that's most important to me right now in my own set of values? And what can I do with my hands, my feet, my mouth? Because that's how we do with our hands, our feet, and our mouths. What can I do to try to take a step toward what's important to me? Yeah, I think that's as much of a recap as I'm going to give right now. And I look forward to, thank you. Yeah, this is a big one. When we are living in that place where we are paying attention to our needs, it's a very different experience when we're talking with others. You can see on the left, we can have these conversations where we're just exchanging ideas. Do I agree with you? Don't I agree with you? Are you doing what I want? Do I like what you're doing? Or I can take that spotlight of my attention, instead of looking at what other people think or getting lost in what I'm thinking, I can take it to this other level of what is it that's important to me right now? Not a strategy, right? I want you to do X. That is a strategy to get a need met rather than a need that's important. Needs don't have strategies attached to them. And I talked last time about this idea of, am I with this person and seeing them as a math problem, which I would say is more on the left? Oh, there's something wrong. I don't agree with them. I have to show them. I have to whatever. Or can I see them as a beautiful sunset? Because whenever my attention is going to both my own longings and needs, and also when I'm trying to guess at other people's longings and needs, it's a different experience. There's no urgency, there's no goal about it. I can say, yeah, we don't see things the same. And I also can understand that, you know, whatever it is, safety is really important to you. And safety is important to me too. And we have different strategies in mind about how to get to that. But I see you as a human being again. I haven't forgotten all the years of experience that we've had with each other. And I just see you as this terrible cardboard cutout image of whatever stereotypes I have. So again, kind of maybe this last slide is the most important one in the recap. What am I putting? Where's my attention going? Is my attention going on things that are going to contribute to me getting stuck? Or am I using my attention to try and find that connection at the level of human need and longing? So that's it.
Thank you very much, Anne. And if you had questions as Anne was speaking, please put them in the box and we will get to them after the break. Uh, we're going to move on to listen to Holly now as she recaps safe and healthy intimate partner relationships. So, Holly, if you want to unmute yourself and begin.
Great. Welcome back, everybody. I kind of want to just keep listening to Anne, but I'm glad to be back and recapping what we talked about last week. But it's such a powerful message, and I just absolutely love what she has to say. So, but let's recap our what we talked about last week with safe and healthy intimate partner relationships. And you can advance the slide, Barbara. All right, so our objectives last week, we wanted to understand the differences between healthy and unhealthy relationships. And to do that, we looked at a great TED Talk where we learned a little bit more about some early warning signs in relationships that tend to end up unhealthy, and at the worst case scenario, they end up abusive. So we looked at red flags and green flags and just tried to figure out the difference between those types of relationships. And at the core was a sense of power and control. So what we're looking at really in any relationship, is there a pretty equal balance of power? Do both people in the relationship, are they able to show up 100% as themselves and be themselves? And again, that doesn't mean there is no conflict. A lot of healthy relationships have conflict. Life isn't easy, but the person that you're with should make you feel like you have what we call the strong base. And we talked a little bit about attachment theory. So just as we needed when we were babies, we needed a connection. We needed to feel safe. We needed to feel like our needs were met. We need that as adults as well. And we talked about how we truly have a biological need to connect to other people. And so not wanting to be alone doesn't make you weak or needy or dependent or anything like that. It just means that you're human, because for thousands of years, we've needed to connect with one another in order to survive. And that connection continues in order for us to emotionally survive and thrive. We talked quite a bit about abusive relationships and what those look like. And I probably ran some statistics by you about 1 in 4 women and 1 in 9 men will be abused in their lifetime. So this is incredibly prevalent. We should almost go through life assuming that anybody that we're encountering might have had a trauma history, because it's just that common. And so those are the types of things we bring into relationships, whether it's trauma that maybe we experienced as kids. We talked a little bit about ACEs, the Adverse Childhood Experiences. It's a landmark study that looked at all the different things that children might witness or be exposed to that can create some or impact their long-term health outcomes in a negative way. How we show up with our baggage and our history, and that's not a bad thing. That just makes us who we are. But also influences our expectations about what we should expect from other people, right? So if our models were our parents or our caregivers, or our models were romantic movies or video games or something else, that all influences how we think intimate partner relationships should look. Not all of us had the best models growing up, right? So, you know, we bring all of this to the table. And so just having an understanding about that. We talked a bit about boundaries as well, the importance of setting boundaries, knowing your boundaries, and as much as you can, just having a strong sense of self. Who am I? What do I want? You know, a lot of times the folks that I've talked to who have been in abusive relationships, by the time they're out of the relationship, they don't even know who they are anymore. they've had their power and control taken away to the point where, you know, simple things, what brings me joy on a day-to-day basis, those are difficult questions for people to ask. So all of this with the red flags and the green flags, that's all just set up as a way to kind of protect ourselves. Hurt people. You've probably heard that before, and that's definitely the truth. I also talked about how we can all become ambassadors for healthy relationships. And ways to do that is to be a safe person that other people within your life can go to. So if somebody is being abused and they need help, can you be that non-judgmental voice of support? Can you hear them out? Can you say things like, it's not your fault, I'm so glad you told me? And can you do things like offer unconditional support rather than advice? So you need to get out of there. You need to leave right away. I'm telling you, this is what you have to do. That's all advice. Those are directives. And people that have been abused have had their power and control taken away. And sometimes our efforts to help are actually controlling. I heard this, I didn't say this last week, so sorry, this isn't part of the recap, but I love this quote, that control is caring's angry cousin. So they're related. So it's a good thing to keep in mind. Another way to become an ambassador for a healthy relationship is think about the communities that you're involved in, whether it's work or faith communities or, you know, other places that in the community are potential lifelines for survivors of domestic and sexual violence. Those lifelines have been really difficult for survivors to connect with, particularly during the lockdown. But if we can think about those places that act as lifelines to survivors, and if those places need additional information about domestic violence, about what it looks like, about what it is and what it isn't, that we can create a much safer community for everybody. You can advance the slide, Barbara. I think I covered a lot. Oh yeah, I didn't talk about the relationship spectrum. This is a great way to view really any relationship. A lot of the calls that we get on our helpline are, this and this is happening to me. Is that abusive? Or I don't know if I'm being abused because they've never hit me. I've never had to call the police, but I feel pretty manipulated and I get called names. I get prevented from using my phone or from leaving a room or getting to my car keys if I need to take a break. Those are a lot of the types of questions that we get. So kind of thinking about what is an unhealthy relationship, what is an abusive relationship, and particularly what does emotional abuse look like, because that's the most difficult one to identify. That can be really helpful, not only for ourselves, but in supporting other people that we know and care about as well. And next slide. We talked about this. Domestic violence is a pattern of abusive behavior. It's all about power and control. And so that's really at the heart of anything. So if you hear, that's another way to be an ambassador, is you can be a myth buster. So if someone says, I don't understand how anybody could end up in an abusive relationship, I would get out of there in a second. I think you just must have low self-esteem if you end up in a relationship like that. You can bust that myth, because domestic violence is about power and control. It's not about blaming the victim. And nobody ever imagines that they'll end up being in an abusive relationship. So it's very insidious. I was in an abusive relationship while I was doing work like this, and I couldn't see the forest through the trees. So that's how prevalent it is. And then we could look at the next slide. So I talked about how to be an ambassador by supporting survivors, spreading the word, and really just practicing and modeling healthy relationships. That's the best thing that we can do for the kids that are in our lives, and really just anyone that's around us. So for all those kids that don't have those healthy models, maybe you can have, be that healthy model. Maybe you and your partner can be that healthy model, or maybe you can just be a healthy model in general by just being an open person that really understands who you are And, you know, some of the things that Anne was talking about too, can we connect on a heart level, not just a head level? Can we see each other as beautiful works of arts, rather of art, versus math problems and people that, you know, we're trying to change their minds, and see things in our perspective. So that's a big part of it too, just being that, showing that healthy relationships with everybody in your life is possible. It doesn't have to be yelling and screaming and name calling. That's what a lot of kids grow up thinking is normal. And of course, that's what they're going to bring into their adult relationships if they don't see or learn otherwise. And if I have a last one, I'll wait to recap the homework. Do you want to do that, Barbara? Or should I talk about it now?
Had to unmute myself. Why don't you go ahead and just go over it as a review for people going into their small groups and being able to talk about how they did with the homework.
Okay. So I'll just recap the homework that we talked about last week, and then Sarah will do her recap. So what we talked about with intimate partner relationships is really you were to practice healthy relationship skills. So identifying key relationships that you currently have, thinking about all those different roles that you play in your life, whether you're a partner, maybe you're the ex-spouse to somebody, maybe you're a parent, maybe you're the child. Well, of course you're the child of somebody, but maybe you have ongoing connections with your adult parents, your maybe older parents, like in my case, where I both my parents are in their 80s, so we've had some really interesting conversations about COVID and things like that, and they are very they're not as concerned as I am, so we've definitely had some conflict about that, but just kind of thinking about the roles that you play in all the different aspects of your life, all those different relationships, and then you were to choose one relationship from your list, knowing that you were going to have some interaction with that person over the week, and just to be really intentional about your use of healthy relationship skills. And some of those skills we talked about were open communication, mutual respect, kindness, setting boundaries. Maybe that's probably the most challenging one. It's really hard to set boundaries with people that aren't used to us setting boundaries with them. Patience, conveying your feelings, that's a hard one too, conveying your true feelings, and then asking for what you need. Sometimes asking for what you need kind of overlaps with that setting boundaries. So hopefully you had a chance to practice some or one or two or maybe more of these, and you also had a chance to take notes on what you learned. You didn't need to include any identifying information, like I just threw my parents under the bus, but they're very wonderful people. But you should be ready to share your experiences at your own comfort level. So hopefully we're at that place. And that's it for my piece. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you, Holly. Great summary. We're going to switch to Sarah now. So Sarah will speak to us and remind us about finding common ground with the people that just need to be in your life. Sarah?
Hi there, and welcome back, everyone. It is great to be back. That week went really quick, didn't it? So yeah, so I just want to do a little recap. I did find, if you want to go ahead, Barbara, in the week, in between, I found a couple of kind of fun quotes here, kind of went with what we were talking about last week. So not everyone thinks the way you think, knows the things you know, believes the things you believe, nor acts the way you would act. Remember this, and you will go a long way in getting along with people. Great thing to always keep in mind. And then there is another one here by one of my favorite actors, Morgan Freeman. Just because I disagree with you doesn't mean I hate you. We need to relearn that in our society. And I think both of these have really, really been needed in the last several months. So just to recap what we talked about, Tips to having a positive conversation. Listening to learn, not firing back. Listening kind of, it's an art form that gosh, not a lot of people really do really super well anymore. And that, listening but not thinking while we're listening. Okay, what am I going to say back? Well, I'm thinking of a story that I want to share, but really thinking. And looking for things that you agree upon. We talked about last week an example of, hey, if we disagree about gun control, we do hopefully agree about the safety of children. So let's start there. And then I had mentioned about doing work with friend of the court, custody evaluations, and gosh, they can be so heated. But looking at that one thing that the parties can agree upon is the love for their child or their children. And so starting there, starting where the things that we agree upon, other things are just going to hopefully lose that intensity. And then there we go. And words and tone, they matter. They matter a lot. So there are ways to communicate in a respectful manner. Not starting with the word you. Starting with, if we're going to share something, we want to try and really start with the word I. The example from last week was, someone that you love and care for, maybe more than one time, they've been known to come home late. So you want to have a good conversation about that. So instead of saying, you're always late, I mean, that whole sentence has about everything wrong with it. Started with you, that puts the other person on the defense, and then using the word always, which is in the next line there. Nothing happens always, or never, or constantly. So saying, I worry about you when you come home late. Now we're having a conversation. And then avoiding always, never, constantly. And then avoiding personal attacks. And then I had the bell there as a something to remember, a reminder for us that, hey, once you ring a bell, you can't unring it. So words do hurt. Words can have a lasting effect. And then staying calm makes a big difference, to stay calm and to not raise our voice. And so then we also talked about ways to communicate. And basically there are 3 different ways. There's passive, there's assertive, and there's aggressive. So passive, thinking that your needs do not matter at all. Let's switch to aggressive, thinking that only your needs matter. So those are the polar opposites. And so we want to gravitate to the middle, being assertive, recognizing that your needs matter as much as anyone else's. So my needs are as important as your needs. Your needs are as important as my needs. And so the arrow there, passive, you win. Assertive, you both win. Aggressive, I win. And so we just mentioned you want to gravitate towards being assertive, trying to do that. And it takes practice. Clarifying what you're feeling, using those I statements. Back to clarify, people don't know unless you tell them. And that's a place where arguments can really start. If you think about in your life, and even thinking about having this thought, well, they just should have known. Well, why didn't they know? Sometimes people they don't know. And that's where assertive comes in. Letting someone know how we feel, being very clear about it, using those I statements, expressing yourself clearly, being confident. That's part of being assertive too, that my feelings matter. Staying calm, that's just a great thing if you can fit that into the way you communicate. And then don't take disagreement as personal. It's not a personal attack. Just like what Morgan Freeman said, it doesn't mean that I hate you. It doesn't mean that it's a personal attack. I just have a different point of view. and then listening, and then remembering people can have different opinions. That's part of being a human being. And sometimes, I know it's surprising, sometimes the people closest to us, siblings that grew up in the exact same household with the same parents, can have very, very different opinions. And then, though, protecting yourself. So if you are being attacked, you shouldn't be yelled at. You should not be called names. You should not be talked over. You should not be told that your views don't matter. You know, back to being yelled at. So at Mosaic, we have a kind of an unwritten policy that I have shared with my fabulous person. She's the director of First Impressions who answers the phone. I have told her that sentence there, you should not be yelled at. If anybody calls you and they're yelling at you, you may hang up the phone. You don't deserve to be yelled at. So always protect yourself, know your boundaries. And then what can we do to help ourselves? The best relationship occurs between two healthy people. You know, sometimes we will have maybe someone come in to Mosaic for relationship counseling, and they might come in by themselves, but they're coming in for relationship counseling. And I might be talking to them and say, you know, it's hard to do the relationship, like the marriage counseling, with just you when the other person won't come in. However, the best relationship are those two healthy people. So let's start with you. You're here. Let's do some individual counseling. Let's try to get you to be at the healthiest mental health state that you can possibly be. And then take care of yourself in every way. So all the things that you can do to help yourself physically and mentally and reduce your stress. Think about something every single day that you can do that is for you. You know, what brings you joy and happiness and peace, and putting those into every day because they are so important. And then I just always like to say, try and limit yourself on social media. Sometimes it's just a dark hole, that tunnel that we just don't need to go down. And you probably even see reports. Sometimes people, that can cause depression or add to depression. So watch yourself on social media. And that is the end of my recap. Barbara, do you want me to go over my homework?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So my homework was thinking about a situation in the past several months that you were passive and what happened. And then I have actually number 2 and number 3 are the same questions, except for replacing passive with assertive and then aggressive. So all 3 of those, how did that work? And then what was the impact of the 3 communication styles on relationships? And then if you had a conversation to do over again from the past several months, what might you have done differently? Hey, hindsight's 2020, and that can help us. I mean, that can really help us to learn, not be hard on ourselves, but what could we have done differently? Gosh, I do that myself, and it's very helpful. Then, and if possible, practice having an assertive conversation with someone. If that was at all possible in your week, and then how did that go? So that was my homework suggestions. Or those were mine.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you, Sarah. So this is the participative part. Everybody's been divided into 3, we have 3 breakout rooms. So there'll be 2 groups with 4, 1 group with 5. And it's an opportunity for you to share with each other. How did that homework go? Did you do it? What did you learn? What went well? what obstacles did you encounter, and what questions do you still have? So we're going to open up the breakout rooms. You're going to have 15 minutes to talk in your group of 4 or 5. And think about, I mean, as you're exchanging, you might notice that there are common themes. There might be questions that come up. And so think about what you would share when we all come back together again, or the questions that you would like answered. And we'll do a combination of looking for people who might want to speak and also reading from the chat. So the next thing is just to take those 15 minutes. We'll be in that group until 2 o'clock to talk about what went well, what obstacles did you encounter, and what questions do you still have. I am going to send you into breakout rooms, and you should have the option to move into your room now. Welcome back, everybody. Hopefully those were really good conversations. And we're gonna change the agenda a little bit because we're a little ahead of time. So we're gonna go right into reporting on common themes and questions, and then we'll take our 1 break instead of 2. So we'll actually even wrap up a little early probably today, which I think everybody always appreciates. But let's move now into, we have a good half an hour that we can talk about the questions, common themes that have come up, and I can see everybody on the screen. We have few enough that we can do that. So I encourage you to either put your thoughts, your questions in the chat, or if you'd like to raise a hand, I can call on you and ask you to unmute. So looking for common themes, questions, just observations from your small group conversation. Mary Jo, go ahead and unmute yourself first.
Okay.
There
Can you
you
hear
go.
me?
Yeah,
Okay.
perfect.
Well, I think that we reiterated what we've been learning, and one is that we have to kind of, first of all, we have to listen, and to listen is not a simple thing because you really have to be there, and you have to quit wondering about what you're going to say, as we've heard earlier, and what is this person really saying, and what are they, and is what they're saying what they're really saying, or do they need something else behind what they're saying? And and at the same time that all this happens, and there might be stress and anxiety in the conversation, to be calm is essential, but it's not natural to me. It was never natural to me. I was a very hyper person and a very anxious person and a very loud person. And to be calm is something that I've been working on for my whole life, for my whole adult life. So I guess I would say those 2 things right now stick out at me. I know that they always say listen, but listen is so much bigger than just the word listen. And to be calm in the conversation is the other thing that really helps. So
Excellent.
that's my comment.
Thank you, Mary Jo. Appreciate that. And any of our panelists, if you'd like to make comment, feel free.
I just want to make one comment. Thanks, Mary Jo. You say that about listening. You know, there's a term called active listening. So it's not, it's so much more than, well, just listen. And what does active listening really mean? Active listening is looking at the person. Having body language that seems accessible. So you can't see the lower part of my body right now, but if I were standing like this, arms folded, that's not give you the feeling of, oh, I really want to listen to you. Maybe kind of, it's kind of hard during COVID right now, but the little bit of a lean in, I'm really listening and reacting. I think that's how we can tell sometimes that someone's really not listening to us, is because there's no appropriate reaction to what we're saying. So active, Barbara, that's an idea for, another part of a workshop, is the art of listening.
Yeah,
And then
excellent.
and then the being calm part too. You're right. That's not sometimes an easy thing to do. And Monica, actually, who is on this, Verplank, has lots of tips, I'm sure, about, mindfulness and that centering yourself and trying to be calm. Because when you're calm, it will radiate to the other person. It's really hard to argue with somebody who's not giving it back to you. If that's not what you want to do and you are just remaining calm, you just don't have anywhere to go. So, all right.
Thank you, Sarah.
Might this be a good time to share some things in the chat?
This would be an excellent time for that, Mary Jane.
So Cherie mentioned that the power of listening was a common theme, and she mentioned empowerment. And I'm sure I'm inferring that the empowerment is both to the person listening as well as to the person speaking. Monica mentioned that our group talked about knowing and understanding each other's love languages with a family unit, a group, many types of groups. Sarah mentioned the common themes in her group were focusing on what is important to us within a relationship and finding areas where we agree to nourish our connection. Sounds like they're going back to Anne's shining a spotlight. Maddie mentioned, can we talk about how we can diffuse stressful conversations where we might not be able to walk away, such as the phone example where you might not be allowed to hang up?
That sounds like let's pause there, yeah, and hear from our panelists.
Well, I'll jump in on that. And I'm also thinking about Mary Jo's comments too. Having self-empathy is a really important skill. And self-empathy sometimes looks like, if someone is yelling at me on the phone, just to say to myself, this is really hard. I'm scared, or I feel alone, or I'm not going to get the understanding that I want right now. And sometimes just naming that can bring a little bit of a shift. And then I know a little bit better what to do from there. But just that acknowledging, I have needs too. Mary Jo, I can relate, So when we feel passionately about things and we feel like that's not being received, it's really frustrating. Or we can have all kinds of feelings about that, but to just name that, like, this is hard right now. I really want this person to get it. And I can find myself getting on that hamster wheel of stuckness about it. So I at least want to step back for a minute, just so I can breathe and regroup. And then I want to see if I feel like trying again to reconnect.
Thank you, Anne.
Can I say something real quick, Barbara?
Please do. Yeah, and please, anything more about kind of diffusing is really helpful.
So the phone conversation specifically, or something, or you're in person, it doesn't matter, and you are being yelled at. It's a stressful conversation. You can always say, hey, I want to have this conversation with you, but not right now. When you feel and you are calm, and you are saying this, again, you are saying this so calmly. When you feel like you can talk and have a conversation, I'd really like to talk to you again. So let's revisit this when you're feeling that way, when you're feeling that you can calmly have the conversation.
And I'll piggyback on that too. At Resilience, with the 24-hour helpline, we get calls around the clock, and a lot of people, they think that we do other things that we don't do, which, Sarah, you're nodding. I know you get the same kind of calls where we have a housing crisis in our community, and so there are homeless folks and they need a place to go. And we provide services for domestic violence survivors, but not for anybody that needs homeless assistance. That is such a challenging thing, to talk to somebody that's really desperate, that needs help, when you don't have a solution for them. And that person getting escalated, it's really to be expected. I mean, any one of us would be, kind of in their shoes. So some of the things that we practice are put both feet on the floor if you're on the phone. And when I get yelled at, my heart starts racing, because I feel like I'm in trouble, right? I think that's probably pretty common too. Although it's not my fault, I can't house the person I'm talking to, I feel really bad about it. And I'm kind of going along with them on this escalation. So I think that's, kind of try to stay grounded, both feet on the floor, take some deep breaths. And most of the time, if it's somebody that you don't know very well that's yelling at you, it has nothing to do with you. You're the messenger. But if it is somebody that you're close with, by all means, draw that boundary. And then I think exactly what Sarah said too, I want to have this conversation with you. That broken record type of thing tends to work really, really well. I know this is so frustrating. I want to have this conversation with you. It's hard to do it when you're so angry, so just kind of keep saying those types of things, and take care of yourself when you finally do get off the line. Give yourself some space. If you can, go take a walk around, do what you got to do, some deep breaths, because it is hard. If you're a caring person, which all of you wouldn't want to know how to have better relationships if you wouldn't be in this workshop, right? So that means you probably have a heart, it's like how the Grinch's heart grew 2 sizes, like your heart was already that big. So you got to protect that heart, knowing that, chances are when someone escalates, you're going to go along for that ride with them just because you have empathy. So yeah, that's and I wanted to make one more point, that Mary Jo, you talked about passion, and I love that. And I think, within the context of this workshop, we're really talking about, those relationships that we have where we have disagreements with people and how to get along and things like that. But there are things that we are passionate about that we really shouldn't be quiet about, and we don't have to be quiet about it. It just doesn't make sense to try to change each individual person in our lives. It's not the best use of our time, really. But maybe there are other things where we can, kind of feel like we're part of the solution, like working with our local representatives, or, taking action, writing letters to members of Congress and things like that. I mean, that to me feels more productive than trying to change the mind of somebody that's had similar thoughts for the last 20, 30 years. I'm not going to get anywhere with that person, but I'm going to feel better like I made some change if I, tell my elected official that, hey, this isn't okay. So hopefully that helps too.
Excellent. Thank you. Are there more comments in chat, Mary Jane? And I encourage everybody to enter comments or raise your hand.
Yeah, there's 2 more. One group talked about their experiences and new perspectives around being assertive and saw growth even within 1 week. So kudos to this conference for that. And the last common theme was around setting up healthy boundaries and understanding self-worth.
Excellent. Any other questions or comments at this point? Okay.
Have enough time, Barbara, in our small group.
You didn't have enough time?
No.
Okay. Well, we're going to go back into small groups. So what we'll do is let's go ahead and take a 15-minute break to kind of process, you know, the recap that you heard, the conversation you had, the questions that are still just kind of floating there. Take the next 15 minutes to kind of reground. And then we'll come back at 2:30. We'll go into small groups, but this time we'll have a speaker in each of those groups. And then after 10 minutes, we'll switch. So you'll have each speaker in your group for 10 minutes for that more intimate opportunity for conversation. All right, so that's the plan. Stretch your legs, refill your tea, use the restroom, and we will be back at 2:30. I hope those were productive conversations. Seeing a lot of smiles. Good, good. Now we get an opportunity to hear from our panelists again. Any final comments, especially having been in these small groups and listening to the more intimate conversations. So each of our panelists can take up to 10 minutes for final comments. And Anne, why don't we start with you?
Okay, well, I was kind of saved by the bell from the last group because Millie she had an amazing question, which is, you know, this is all great for us in our individual conversations, but we're having huge problems at a societal level. And, you know, what is this? Am I getting that right, Millie? And what do we do about that? I happen to think that doing this work, trying to see other people as human beings, even when we don't agree with them, finding a way to stay grounded and connected to the things that we value and trying to live out of those values, I honestly think that's the way through. And I think I said last time, democracy essentially is about the way we live with each other. It's not about we have to be in agreement, but it's how are we going to navigate? How do we go to the grocery store? How do we work with people? How do I deal with my neighbor who has yard signs that I really don't enjoy? And how am I walking through that in my everyday life? So I think it's an ongoing conversation that we're all a part of, and it's a huge experiment right now. And for me, I find it helpful to just keep my eyes on things that I can do. What can I do in my world with my hands, feet, and mouth? Generally, you know, going on Twitter is not that helpful because there's not a lot that I can do about that. That actually gets me more into a stuck place. I find, you know, I feel like a victim. I feel angry. I feel like there's nothing I can do about it. So I have to make choices about that for myself. And I think that's very personal for everyone. Yeah, I'm not sure I have anything else to add at this point. If there's something else that people want to ask, I'm happy to answer that. But I've really enjoyed these breakouts and just hearing where people are, what they've applied, what has been helpful, just the longings of your own heart for how to be in the world right now. So thanks.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Anne, for all that you have brought to this conversation. Holly, closing remarks from you.
Absolutely. We had some great conversations. And I think to piggyback on what Anne said too, it's we can fight for social justice. These things are important to us. It's not about losing your passion. It's just about how do we get along with the people in our immediate world, right? How do we get through Thanksgiving dinner or whatever the case may be? And I think when it comes to unhealthy and healthy relationships, how do we recognize when there's a situation that we need to get out of? And how do we do that? And how could we possibly support other people in doing the same thing? I echo the same thing about, Twitter doesn't do anything for me except for make me angry. For other people, that's, they like to, they like to tweet. I don't. I just like Sarah said, avoiding social media, I think, is healthy for body, mind, and spirit. What we don't want is to become hopeless, because if things are important to us, and we feel shot down by the people that are close in our network, and then we go online and it feels like we're all alone, that's a tough place to be. So I would echo that. And then one of the things that came up in our small group, which Millie, you were really on board with this idea too, is just delving in maybe another forum about communication and gender, and talking about communication and relationships, and going back to that power and control. What does that look like? What does it look like if the person that you're trying to communicate with, ignores the fact that maybe you're an expert here, and how do you maneuver some of that? So I thought that was an interesting thing to think about, maybe as a next step. And we also talked about healthy relationships and getting messaging to kids when they're younger, starting from little kids, being able to talk about boundaries with them, and how they can carry that into future relationships, and just know what's healthy, what's unhealthy, and that their body is theirs and their opinions are important, and how all those things truly are connected. So anything else that anybody from any of the groups want to add about? Sarah, I'll just call you out a little bit too. Sarah's a psychologist, and she said, she mentioned about, kind of when you're in this type of work where you're helping people, it's not always easy to see for yourself if there's something that relationship wise that might be helpful to you, and has encountered some of that with folks that she knows, colleagues that she knows, that we talk a lot about healthy relationships, but that doesn't mean we don't have plenty of work to do in our own lives, right? Just like Barbara said, we may be experts, but all of us have something to bring to the table, and we're not flawless. I loved the TED Talk, if you remember from last week, the woman that said, she talks about healthy relationships, and then out of nowhere, her kids are driving her crazy, and she says, I'm going to take everything away from you forever. And her son says, Mom, that's not love. Just recognizing the fact that we have to work at this. It's an ongoing process. So I think that's important to think about.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you, Holly, for those words. Sarah, concluding remarks from you. And then we will, after we hear from her, I will ask if there's any other questions before we do our last breakout. So Sarah, please.
Okay, I have just enjoyed this so much. A couple things that thinking about the different conversations, the smaller conversations that we had. I heard several people talk about how they had done something, tried intentionally to be assertive over the last week. And I think that is so awesome. Just so great that you did that. Or even just thought about it. And so something that I had suggested maybe in one or two of the groups, it takes practice, and, grab a journal, and maybe before you go to bed or first thing in the morning, kind of reflect on the day before, because if you let too many days go by, it's just all a blur. I'll just speak for myself. It's just a blur. So, did something happen today or yesterday that, I wish that maybe I had been more assertive, and write down, or not aggressive. that not passive or not aggressive. And so write down, you know, what you said, and then think about it, you know, using some of the information that, you know, we just learned about last week. How could I have said that in a way that was clear, concise, you know, got my feelings across and all that. So that's a suggestion. You know, and then that listening, you know, again, that takes practice. And, you know, I think this is just a great overarching thing to try to just relax and have a good sense of humor. You know, last night I was sitting in my living room and my husband was sitting in our living room, and I was talking to him for probably, a solid maybe 3 minutes about something, and he didn't respond. And so I said, "Did you hear me?" I was checking in, and he looked at me and he said, "I didn't listen to a word you said." Now, that could have gone many different directions. And instead of, you know, "What do you mean you weren't listening to me?" I just laughed. He was honest, you know, I mean, he just came right out and said, not a word. So I tried to you know, chuckle a little bit, then say, "Okay, I'm going to try again. Need your eyes on me." I really wanted to share this with you after we both got the chuckle, but you know what? It's okay. Now, if this were to happen constantly, then I would have to have a more assertive conversation. But I just applaud you all for taking the time to do this. You know, we obviously care a lot about the people, friends, and family in our lives, and want to have as good conversations as possible. So just, hey, keep up the good work and practice, and hopefully we'll run into each other again.
Thank you, Sarah. So with that, any other questions? Yes, Paul.
Yeah, I just want to add to that. I have learned, and I'm trying and I practice it all the time. The 3 words I don't use with my wife anymore are, "Don't you remember?" So, you know, it's not that I'm trying to be mean or anything, but it's just one of the same things, like you said, "Didn't you hear me? Don't you remember?" It's difficult. So I'm saying, boy, I must have misunderstood or something, or doing some other way, because that one is an immediate killer for the conversation.
Yes, excellent, excellent. Anybody else? Comment or question?
I happened to miss the first part of the session last week, and I that TED Talk is something. Is that in the recorded session? Is that in there, Barbara?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
it is.
All right.
It's actually, I take that back. That needed to be edited out, I think, for copyright, but the link to it is in the email.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah.
Good. I'll go back and look at that then, because that's something I would be interested in. Thank you.
Yeah, it's very good. Anything else?
Yes, my
Yeah.
question. Well, what, not to just sound like, you know, black or white or something tough and something more heartfelt, what are we going to do with this?
Well, that's actually the next step.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. I figured you had a plan, but I just wondered. And you know, I also, because I only know one person here. And I figure that most of the people are psychologists or counselors, and maybe I'm wrong. And there's a variety of ages here, which I really like, because as someone said, I think it was Holly, there is so much to teach people that we didn't used to know. In my, at least as a younger person. So I guess it's important for us to hear what the young people are learning and and how they are really making it work in their life. And even though some of us are older, I mean, we still can change, and we still can grow, and we still can try things that would work better in our lives. So I'm just wondering what you're going to do, and I know you're going to tell us, so I'll just be quiet. But thank you all. That's what I want to say.
Any other comments or questions before next steps? So there's a couple of things. One is we're going to do a final breakout so that you can share with each other what your next steps are. And then the task force, the mental illness task force and the anti-racism task force that combined to make this workshop possible is now planning one specifically for teens to help teens with parents and siblings and peers and whatnot. So we'll be offering that. There's also been a request that we put together something specifically to help people talk about race and racism. So we'll be looking at those other workshop opportunities, and then the feedback that we get, from this conversation. The suggestions, it's everything is organic and in motion. So the idea isn't a one-off, right? It's not, okay, we talked about it, now everybody's cool. Like we
Right.
recognize that this is a continual ongoing process. But what we want to do now is allow you in this workshop to go into your small groups again without your panelist speaker and share with each other your next steps. What will you do with this? And so I'm going to send you back into your breakout rooms. They're pre-assigned, so speakers, you can just not go in. You can just stay out and give people a chance to talk. And we will be back at, it looks like about 4:02. No, that's not right. 10:20. We'll be back in 15 minutes. Okay, welcome back. I hope that was helpful and that you all are looking forward to next steps. It's always good to have a small group of people to make those declarations to. It kind of helps hold us accountable. So thank you for being in those groups and for sharing with each other. I have a polling question for you next. And it's a pretty simple polling question. How helpful has this workshop been? On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not helpful at all, and 10 being extremely helpful. If you could just rank that, that'll help us. And then hit the submit. And then I also want to share that we want to give you a chance to process and think again over the content that we've shared over the past 2 weeks. And you'll be getting a Survey Monkey tomorrow with a few more detailed questions. And that gives us the opportunity for open-ended questions too. Whereas with Zoom polling, we can only ask kind of those set questions. So please look for that Survey Monkey, and then please take the 90 seconds it will take to fill that out. That'll be really, really helpful. I'm still waiting for about 3 people to vote, if you would. And then I'm going to close this in just about 5 seconds. Those are probably our speakers that haven't voted. And 3, 2, 1. And just so you see, I think that's very encouraging to see that people found this helpful. 58% giving it a 10 and nobody below a 7. So thank you. Kudos to our speakers. You are the reason for that. You guys have just done an exemplary job, and I couldn't be more grateful for the information you shared and for the significant amount of time that you committed to making this happen. to ask you to do a 2-part workshop and take 2 full afternoons, 2 weeks in a row is a heavy lift. And yet every one of you was more than happy to oblige and to bring this information and content to people. So many, many thanks to Anne, to Holly, to Sarah, and also to Mary Jane. Mary Jane, thank you for keeping my feet on the ground through this day. Andrea Dersham was also with us last week, and she was playing that role and was not able to be here today, but many, many thoughts of gratitude and appreciation to both Andrea and Mary Jane.
Barbara,
And-
I have a question for
Yeah,
you.
Go ahead.
Someone in my breakout room was wondering what kind of follow-up materials might we expect? For example, could we see the slides in the recordings?
Yes, so we sent out the 1 packet already. We will send out a 2nd packet with all of these slides. The recording might be delayed a little bit just because there's a lot of downtime that would be good to edit that out before sending it. But we will get that to you and we'll send out that survey. In the first packet, there were some other materials that our speakers included as well. But hopefully you should get everything except maybe we'll just send you the recording tomorrow. Just recognize that it'll have all these long blank times when you were in small group. It's nice to edit that out, but I don't have an editor on staff, so we'll do our best. But you should be able to, you'll get the slides for sure and the survey tomorrow. Other
And
questions?
just to be clear, there's no transcript, correct?
There is no, we do not have anybody that was doing closed caption during this workshop. We do have closed captioning at our town halls, but we did not have for the workshop. Other questions? Okay, then please, each of you, in addition to our panelists taking that time, you took that time. You've taken significant amount of time over your last 2 weeks in the workshop, practicing in between, and to have that kind of commitment to improving the relationships in your own life and in our society. That is how we change things. It's 1 person at a time, and we all do, if we all do what we can do, we will create a happier, safer, more just society for everybody. So thank you. Thank you for playing a part. Until next time, the divine in me recognizes and bows to the divine in you. Namaste.
And thank you, Barbara.
You're welcome.
Barbara, are you still there?
I am still here.
Were we going to do next steps?
Well, we talked about the
Or
next
did we do them?
steps. Yeah.
Okay.
I didn't
Okay.
ask everybody to share
Right.
because sometimes that gets personal.
Mhm. True, it does. I was just curious. One thing I'd like to, while we have a speaker, at least Sarah's